Imagine waking up one morning, a slight chill in the air. The light filters through the curtains, and for a brief moment, the world seems soft and beautiful. Yet as you take in the familiar surroundings of your room, an unsettling feeling begins to crawl through you. You realize, without any clear reason, that the world is different now. Your mind, sharper than ever, begins to unravel the subtle truths lurking beneath the surface of your everyday life. Things that once felt secure and unquestionable now feel fragile, as though they might crumble under the weight of your newfound awareness. This is the paradox you face. The more you know, the less you can be happy. The more you grasp the intricacies of human nature, the more painfully aware you become of the inherent flaws and absurdities of existence. The more you understand about society's illusions, the systemic lies we all buy into, the more alienated you feel from the world you once thought you understood. You become aware of the limitations of language, the cracks in the fabric of human relationships, and the meaninglessness that pervades even the most carefully constructed philosophies of purpose. Your mind, once a trusted ally, becomes your greatest burden. You feel like a prisoner, not of the physical world, but of your own intellectual capacity. Why is it that knowledge, something we're conditioned to seek, can bring this unbearable weight? Why does understanding seem to erode the very joy and satisfaction it promises to deliver? How is it that the pursuit of truth, of wisdom, of intellectual mastery seems to lead us to a place where happiness is no longer a natural part of life? This isn't an abstract question. It's one that philosophers, mystics, and even scientists have grappled with for centuries. Why does the act of deep reflection and exploration often come at the cost of personal contentment? It's as this. Or the more we peel back the layers of reality, the more we discover how incomplete, broken, and inherently tragic everything is. The more we learn, the more we suffer. This paradox has a name: the philosopher's curse. It's the hidden cost of knowledge, the existential price we pay for seeing too much. At first, this may seem like a dramatic exaggeration. Isn't the search for truth the highest calling? Shouldn't it empower us, freeing us from ignorance and blind conformity? Isn't understanding the world and ourselves the path to meaning? But the deeper you go, the more troubling it becomes. There's a truth that few talk about. Knowing too much can make you numb to the beauty of life, suffocate your sense of wonder, and bind you to an endless cycle of intellectual restlessness. What happens when you know more than you can bear to understand? The more you dig into the dark corners of your psyche, the more you realize that the human condition, something you once believed could be mastered, will never be fully understood or controlled. Perhaps you start reading Nietzsche and realize that life may not have inherent meaning, that it's up to you to impose your own. But then, Nietzsche's abyss looks back at you. It challenges you to will yourself into existence, even as it leaves you confronting a cold, indifferent universe. You read Schopenhauer, and he tells you that life is suffering, a relentless wheel of desire and dissatisfaction. You read Jung, and suddenly, your own psyche becomes a battleground between your conscious mind and the shadows you try to suppress. Then comes Sartre with his existential freedom. You are condemned to choose, condemned to exist in a world where nothing but your actions give life meaning. Yet even in that freedom, you are overwhelmed by a terrible isolation. These are the thinkers who speak the truth, but their truths are not easy to swallow. They force you to confront the parts of yourself that you'd rather not see. They challenge you to ask questions you might not want to answer. And so, you reach a point where the pursuit of knowledge begins to feel like a double-edged sword. It offers insight and clarity, yes, but also strips away the comforting layers of ignorance that allowed you to function in a world you now see as cruel and absurd. The price of enlightenment is disillusionment, and the deeper you go, the more you feel its sting. Perhaps you've started to wonder if it's better to remain blissfully ignorant. Could you return to a simpler life where you didn't know about the inherent flaws of modern society, where you didn't see the endless cycles of consumerism, the quiet despair lurking in the eyes of your friends, the existential void in the heart of every achievement you've ever pursued? Could you trade your intellectual knowledge for the naive happiness of those who never stop to question? But then, a deeper question begins to haunt you. Is ignorance truly bliss? Can a person find peace by retreating into willful oblivion? Or does the search for truth inevitably lead to a place where happiness is forever out of reach? What if the very nature of human existence is a paradox that cannot be reconciled, that no matter how much we know, there is always something that eludes our grasp, that the more we seek to understand the world, the more we uncover the deep cracks in our own souls? The question that lingers unanswered is this: can a philosopher ever truly be happy? The journey of a philosopher is one of ceaseless inquiry, a path that pulls them deeper into the heart of darkness, the essence of existence itself, and the more they uncover, the more they realize that understanding may not lead to fulfillment. It may in fact do the opposite. Is it possible to break free from this curse? You might think the answer lies in simple detachment, in rejecting the pursuit of knowledge altogether. But what if the path to happiness lies not in ignorance, but in embracing the tension between knowing and accepting that some things will never be fully understood? This is where the next question arises. To move forward, we must first explore the origins of this curse, the unseen forces that shape our intellectual and emotional landscapes. The question is not just how to live with knowledge, but how to live with knowledge in a way that doesn't destroy us. But how did we get here? To understand why knowing too much can feel like a curse, we must first explore the psychological and philosophical underpinnings that give birth to this paradox. It's not just about acquiring knowledge, it's about how knowledge shapes our perception of reality, how it molds our psyche, and how it interacts with the deepest aspects of human existence. At the heart of this issue is a fundamental contradiction. The more we know, the less we can truly experience the world as it is. This is not a new idea. In fact, philosophers and psychologists have been grappling with this for centuries, each in their own way, trying to understand why wisdom often leads to despair. Carl Jung is one of the first figures who comes to mind when we discuss this curse. Jung's exploration of the shadow, those parts of the self that are repressed or denied, illustrates the danger of excessive self-awareness. The more you know about yourself, the more you become aware of your flaws, your contradictions, and your darkest impulses. Jung believed that the pursuit of self-knowledge, if undertaken without caution, can lead to psychic inflation, where you become so obsessed with your understanding of your inner world that you lose touch with reality itself. Jung wasn't just talking about an intellectual pursuit. He was describing a spiritual sickness, one that pulls you into an endless cycle of introspection. With every layer of the psyche you uncover, you're forced to confront the uncomfortable truths about who you really are. And each time you peer into the abyss of your own mind, you realize how much you don't know. This endless uncovering, paradoxically, can rob you of the peace and clarity that knowledge promises. But it doesn't stop there. Jung's theory is not only psychological, it's also deeply philosophical. Knowledge, in his view, isn't just an intellectual pursuit, it's a form of existential confrontation. When you know too much about yourself, you must face the very limits of your understanding. You are not just confronted with your flaws, but with the realization that the very act of knowing is a form of self-imprisonment. The more you know, the more you are aware of what remains unknown. And the more you know, the more you realize that no matter how much wisdom you gather, you'll never truly escape the limitations of your own existence. This leads us to the insights of Friedrich Nietzsche, whose work offers a powerful lens through which to understand the curse of knowing too much. Nietzsche's concept of the Übermensch, the overman or superman, is a response to the realization that life lacks inherent meaning. But what's crucial in his philosophy is the idea of becoming, a constant striving, a never-ending tension between what you are and what you could be. The more you know about life's absurdity, the more you are forced to create your own meaning. And yet, Nietzsche warns that the quest to transcend the limitations of your own humanity can lead to a kind of nihilism, a despair born from understanding that, no matter how much you strive, the void remains. In Nietzsche's view, those who seek knowledge are both cursed and empowered. The philosopher's mind is endlessly in flux, trying to reconcile the truth of existence with the need to find meaning, but every step closer to the truth seems to bring more suffering. The deeper you go, the more you realize that truth may not even exist in a form that can offer comfort. It's a cruel paradox. The very act of understanding that life is meaningless may render the pursuit of meaning itself a futile endeavor. This is the essence of the philosopher's curse. Then there's Arthur Schopenhauer, whose pessimism about human nature might seem extreme, but is nonetheless an essential piece of the puzzle. Schopenhauer argued that life, in its essence, is will, a ceaseless striving toward an unattainable goal. The more we know, the more we realize that this endless will only leads to dissatisfaction, anxiety, and suffering. Schopenhauer's philosophy suggests that knowledge only amplifies our awareness of life's futility. The more we know, the more we see the suffering inherent in existence, whether in the form of our own desires, the struggles of others, or the inevitable march of time that erodes everything we hold dear. For Schopenhauer, ignorance may indeed be bliss, because once we become aware of the pervasive suffering of life, it becomes nearly impossible to live without pain. To understand too much is to be trapped in an endless loop of disillusionment. His solution? To minimize desire, to detach oneself from the cycles of craving and discontent. But how can one live in the world with this understanding and still feel the freedom to act, to create, to be? It is, in Schopenhauer's view, a dilemma that leads to profound despair for those who truly understand it. While these thinkers approached the issue from different angles, they all grappled with the same fundamental truth. The search for knowledge, whether about the world or about the self, inevitably leads to suffering. The more we understand the nature of existence, the more we are confronted by its inherent flaws, contradictions, and tragedies. This theme can also be found in the work of Jean-Paul Sartre, whose philosophy of existentialism revolved around the idea of radical freedom and responsibility. Sartre posited that we are condemned to be free, meaning that we are entirely responsible for creating meaning in an indifferent world. But this freedom is suffocating. Once you become aware that you are entirely responsible for every action, every choice, every meaning you create, the weight of that knowledge can become unbearable. Sartre's bleak conclusion was that the more we understand our freedom, the more alienated we feel. We cannot escape the responsibility of our own existence, and this makes living authentically a constant struggle against despair. Aldous Huxley brings a different perspective, one more grounded in the psychological effects of the modern world. Huxley's critique of society, especially in works like Brave New World, focuses on the dangers of a culture built on superficial pleasures, consumerism, and the distractions that numb us to the deeper, more troubling truths of life. Huxley feared that, in our pursuit of comfort, we'd lose sight of our higher potential for awareness and self-reflection. Yet Huxley also warned that too much knowledge, especially of the philosophical and psychological variety, can be paralyzing. The more we understand about human nature, the more we realize how little we control. The overwhelming complexity of our social, psychological, and spiritual lives can create a sense of isolation and futility. And yet, beneath all of this, there remains a lingering question. Is it possible to break free from this curse of knowledge? Is there a way to embrace the truth without being swallowed by it? To hold the knowledge of life's absurdity, its suffering, and its meaninglessness without losing all sense of joy and hope? The answer, perhaps, lies not in rejecting knowledge or pretending it doesn't exist, but in finding a way to live with it, not as the sole lens through which we view the world, but as a tool for deeper understanding that doesn't overshadow the capacity for human connection, joy, and experience. What does it mean when knowledge begins to shape not just your intellectual world, but your emotional and psychological reality? What happens when the sheer weight of understanding starts to seep into every aspect of your life, subtly altering the way you interact with the world? You might not even notice it at first. The slow erosion of your sense of ease, the creeping sense of alienation that grows as you accumulate more and more insights. You may start to feel more distant from others, as if they live in a different reality, a simpler, more naive world where they don't see the truths that you now know. Conversations begin to feel shallow, the small talk of daily life hollow and unimportant. The deeper you dive into your knowledge, the less satisfying these surface-level exchanges become. You begin to question the motives behind everything. Why do people do what they do? Is it driven by their need for validation? Is it a desperate escape from the truth? You may even find that the more you know, the harder it becomes to connect with others on a genuine level. The intellectual barriers you've built between yourself and the world can make it difficult to feel understood. The more insight you gain into the chaos of human nature, the more you realize that most people are not even aware of the forces shaping their lives. The knowledge you gain becomes a kind of prison. This is the silent consequence of intellectual awakening, the alienation that arises from knowing too much. In psychological terms, this alienation can be understood through the lens of cognitive dissonance, a phenomenon first described by psychologist Leon Festinger in 1957. Cognitive dissonance occurs when there is an inconsistency between what we know or believe and the reality we experience. When you acquire a deeper understanding of life, especially its darker aspects, the clash between your new awareness and the everyday lives of those around you can feel jarring. It's as though you've become an outsider in a world that no longer makes sense. You begin to see the cracks in the foundation of society, in relationships, and in human motivations. The dissonance between your inner understanding and the external world creates a kind of emotional discomfort that grows harder to ignore. But what if this discomfort is a necessary consequence of growth? You begin to wonder whether the price of truth is an emotional toll that cannot be avoided. This dissonance is the constant tug-of-war between your intellectual awareness and the world's stubborn adherence to simplicity. It is the struggle between enlightenment and blissful ignorance, and, in many ways, it feels like a battle you cannot win. The more you know, the further you are from peaceful acceptance of the world as it is. The more you understand, the more you realize that the structures around you are illusions meant to keep you from seeing the truth. This alienation is not limited to your relationship with society. It can also seep into your relationship with your own identity. In a world where knowledge is often valued above all else, the more you know, the more you begin to see yourself not as a person, but as a collection of ideas, facts, and abstractions. Your self-worth becomes tied to your intellect, and you may begin to feel like a mere thinker, an observer detached from the emotional and existential experiences that others take for granted. The mind becomes a cage that isolates you from the body, from your true desires, from your raw emotions. Consider the famous existentialist Jean-Paul Sartre, who argued that freedom is both liberating and suffocating. The more we know about our freedom to create meaning in a meaningless world, the more we become burdened by the responsibility that comes with it. This existential realization can leave you feeling as though you are standing in an empty universe, with no one but yourself to rely on. You may ask, if I am free to shape my life, why do I feel so disconnected, so isolated? The deeper you know, the harder it becomes to find true connection. This sense of alienation extends to the very nature of relationships. Relationships are, at their core, built on mutual understanding and shared experience. Yet once you uncover the complexities of human nature, once you start understanding the psychological motivations behind every action, every word, it can feel like those around you are nothing more than actors on a stage. Their actions, their words, are no longer innocent or spontaneous. You see the underlying mechanisms of behavior, the insecurity driving their need for approval, the fears pushing them to conform, the subtle lies they tell to make life bearable. This may sound cynical, but it's often the realization that knowledge of human nature isn't always freeing. It can instead create a kind of moral dissociation. Take Gabor Mate's exploration of addiction, for example. He doesn't simply view addiction as a personal failing. He sees it as a reaction to the deeper emotional and psychological wounds caused by societal neglect, trauma, and alienation. Knowledge of these underlying causes doesn't offer immediate relief. In fact, it may deepen your empathy for others' suffering, but also increase your frustration with the system that perpetuates such cycles. The more you understand the forces shaping people's addictions, their coping mechanisms, the more you realize that true change is elusive, both for yourself and for the world around you. In a similar vein, when you look at modern society, it can feel like a never-ending parade of distractions. Knowledge about the way consumerism manipulates desires, the way technology exploits human vulnerability, the way the educational system discourages genuine critical thinking, it all piles up. Each new insight brings you further away from the mass culture that feeds on ignorance, and the farther you move from the mainstream, the less you find yourself able to relate to the people who still cling to those illusions. You find yourself lost in a sea of intellectual abstraction, unable to reconcile the wisdom you've gained with the shallow waters of everyday life. This intellectual alienation isn't just a psychological phenomenon, it's deeply neurobiological. Research in cognitive science and neuroscience suggests that the more you think about complex ideas, the more you activate certain brain regions that heighten your sense of isolation. The default mode network, which is responsible for self-referential thought and our sense of individual identity, becomes overactive when we engage in constant rumination or intellectual contemplation. The result is a heightened sense of self-consciousness and, paradoxically, an increasing emotional distance from others. The more we intellectualize, the more we withdraw from the spontaneous and experiential aspects of life. Knowledge becomes an armor, protecting us from the world, but also keeping us at a distance from it. As you begin to grasp these silent consequences of knowledge, you might wonder, how much longer can you live in this intellectual cocoon before it begins to suffocate you? Is it possible to find peace in this state of perpetual awareness, or will the weight of your insights eventually crush you? The truth is, you cannot return to a state of ignorance. Once the veil has been lifted, it cannot be replaced. But can you learn to live with it? Can you learn to carry the burden of knowledge without letting it destroy your sense of joy, connection, and meaning? The question is not whether you can escape from the consequences of knowing too much, but whether you can learn to find freedom within them. The weight of knowledge, the alienation it brings, the existential despair, it's a heavy burden to carry. But perhaps in all this darkness there lies a path forward, a way to break free, not from knowledge itself, but from the suffocating grip it has over your life. Is it possible to embrace the profound truths you've learned without being crushed by them? Can you reclaim your peace, your joy, your connection, despite knowing too much? The answer is not simple, but there is a way out. It requires a radical shift in perspective, a kind of rebellion against the very forces that have made knowledge a cage. The first step in this rebellion is acceptance of the fact that knowledge, in its deepest forms, doesn't always lead to comfort. In fact, it often leads to discomfort, confusion, and alienation. But this discomfort does not have to be your enemy. It can be your ally, a doorway to greater freedom. The philosopher Albert Camus argued that the absurdity of life is not something to escape from, it's something to confront. The myth of Sisyphus, one of his most famous works, tells the story of a man condemned to push a boulder up a mountain for all eternity. The moment Sisyphus reaches the summit, the boulder rolls back down, forcing him to begin again. For Camus, Sisyphus represents the human condition, a never-ending search for meaning in a meaningless world. But he also proposes a radical idea. We must imagine Sisyphus happy. The realization that life's struggles are never-ending doesn't have to lead to despair. Instead, it can lead to acceptance, to finding joy in the struggle itself. In the same way, you must learn to embrace the struggle that comes with knowledge. It will never provide you with perfect answers or eternal peace, but it can provide you with clarity, with the courage to face the absurdity of existence without turning away. To live with knowledge is to live in a constant state of tension between truth and comfort, between meaning and meaninglessness. But in that tension, there is power. This leads us to the second key to breaking free: detachment from the need for control. One of the deepest traps of knowledge is the belief that understanding the world means controlling it, or at least predicting its outcomes. But as many philosophers have pointed out, control is an illusion. Friedrich Nietzsche wrote about the importance of embracing life in all its chaos and unpredictability. To truly live, he argued, is to accept that life will never be orderly or predictable. And yet, most people spend their lives trying to control and compartmentalize their reality, desperately seeking stability and certainty in a world that thrives on chaos. This is where your rebellion begins. You must learn to let go of the need for total understanding, for the sense that you can grasp everything. Instead of trying to solve the mystery of existence, you begin to experience it. You engage with life not as a puzzle to be solved, but as a story to be lived. Imperfect, messy, unpredictable, but full of moments that cannot be fully captured by the intellect. The philosopher Søren Kierkegaard pointed out that to live authentically, one must leap into the unknown, embracing uncertainty as part of the human condition. To relinquish control doesn't mean abandoning knowledge. It means using it not as a tool for domination, but as a lens through which you can better appreciate the complexity of life without feeling the need to solve it. This brings us to the third key to freedom: reconnection with the body and the present moment. Much of the suffering caused by knowledge stems from the way it disconnects you from the immediacy of experience. When you know too much, you begin to live in your head, trapped in abstract concepts and intellectual analysis. But this is not where life happens. Life happens in the body, in the visceral, in the raw emotions and sensations that you experience now. Viktor Frankl, in his work on logotherapy, suggested that the key to overcoming despair and existential suffering lies in the search for meaning. Even in the most difficult circumstances, he emphasized that meaning is not something to be found in abstract thoughts, but something to be created through action, through engagement with the world. The moment you step away from endless rumination and into the present moment, you begin to break free from the grip of knowledge. You begin to feel the freedom of living in a way that is not controlled by intellectual pursuits, but by immediate, embodied experience. This return to the body is also a return to the emotional and relational aspects of life. Remember that Carl Jung believed that the path to integration, the process of becoming whole, was not just about intellectual understanding, but about embracing both the light and the dark parts of the self. It's about stepping into your own humanity, with all its flaws, contradictions, and emotions. The intellectual pursuit of knowledge without emotional depth leads to a cold, detached existence, but when you bring your awareness back to your body and emotions, you can experience knowledge in a fuller, more holistic way. The fourth key to breaking free from the philosopher's curse is embracing simplicity. Knowledge can be overwhelming, but sometimes the deepest truths are the simplest. Aldous Huxley suggested that the key to transcending the modern world's distractions was a return to the simple, natural experiences of life. In our obsession with complexity, we often overlook the beauty in simplicity, the beauty of a quiet moment, the warmth of human connection, the satisfaction of a simple task done well. By consciously choosing simplicity, you can begin to strip away the excess noise created by over-analysis. You realize that, at the end of the day, being is just as important as knowing. Finally, there is the notion of creative expression, an act that connects you not just to the world of ideas, but to the world of experience. When you create, you are no longer merely a passive observer of reality. You become an active participant in it. Creation is an act that transcends intellectualization. It forces you to tap into the primal, the spontaneous, the intuitive. Whether through art, writing, movement, or any form of expression, creativity allows you to engage with the world in a way that knowledge alone cannot. It is a form of rebellion against the tyranny of reason and a return to the fullness of existence. In short, breaking free from the philosopher's curse doesn't require rejecting knowledge. It requires redefining your relationship with it. It's about embracing the discomfort that comes with knowing too much, while also finding ways to reconnect with the fullness of experience. By embracing simplicity, surrendering the need for control, reconnecting with your body, and engaging in creative expression, you can reclaim your peace and your joy. This is the path of rebellion, not to reject knowledge, but to live with it in a way that doesn't consume you. And now, the final realization. The truth so profound, so utterly transformative, that it reframes everything you have learned up until this point. You've explored the burden of knowledge, the alienation, the dissonance, the discomfort. You've delved into the hidden consequences of intellectual awakening, how it shapes your psyche and your relationships, how it makes you feel like a stranger in your own life. You've rebelled, learned to detach, to simplify, to reconnect, and to embrace the fullness of experience. And yet, there is one more thing, one last piece of the puzzle that will unlock everything. What if this entire journey, the isolation, the discomfort, the alienation, was never a curse at all, but a gift? What if the very thing that you've been running from, the knowledge that has made your life so difficult, is actually the key to your freedom? This is the ultimate paradox. In all your attempts to escape the philosopher's curse, you have only been seeking the one thing that is elusive yet crucial to transcendence: acceptance of the paradox of life itself. You see, it is the nature of the human condition to be torn between contradictions, between the desire for meaning and the recognition that life is ultimately meaningless, between the need for certainty and the inevitable truth of uncertainty, between the intellectual understanding of the world and the emotional experience of living in it. These paradoxes, these tensions, are not problems to be solved. They are the essence of what it means to be human. Carl Jung understood this better than most. He spoke of the process of individuation, the journey toward the integration of all parts of the self. It is a process of reconciling opposites, of embracing both the light and the dark aspects of life. Knowledge, when approached with wisdom, becomes a tool not for control or understanding, but for integration. To truly live, you must accept that you cannot have certainty. You cannot have perfect peace. You cannot resolve every contradiction. Instead, you learn to dance with them. This is the ultimate truth. The key to freedom is not to eliminate the tension of knowledge, but to learn to live with it, to find peace within it. When you stop fighting against the complexities and contradictions of life, when you stop seeking to resolve them, something extraordinary happens. You begin to experience freedom not in the absence of knowledge, but in the embrace of it. You learn that you are not defined by your intellect alone, but by the fullness of your humanity, the complexity, the chaos, the paradoxes. Imagine for a moment that you have stopped trying to fix yourself, to solve the world, to find the one answer that will bring peace. Instead, you simply exist, fully aware of the contradictions that shape your experience, but no longer threatened by them. You are able to see that the human condition is not a puzzle to be solved, but a story to be lived. The discomfort you once felt, the isolation, the alienation, it is no longer a burden, but a form of wisdom. You are no longer separate from the world, you are one with it. The greatest thinkers, Jung, Nietzsche, Sartre, Huxley, they all came to this realization in different ways. For them, the ultimate truth was not an abstract concept or a grand theory, but a lived experience. It was about finding meaning in the tension, in the contradictions, and in the acceptance of life's inherent absurdity. It was about letting go of the need for resolution and embracing the rawness of existence. As Sartre said, freedom is what you do with what's been done to you. The more you know, the more free you become, not because you have solved the mysteries of the universe, but because you have learned to live with the mystery. You understand that the only certainty is uncertainty, and yet this does not make life any less beautiful. In fact, it makes it more so, because you no longer feel the need to control it. You accept it as it is, and you are free to experience it. This acceptance, the ability to live with knowledge, with all its contradictions, is what leads to the most profound transformation. When you stop trying to be someone who has everything figured out and instead embrace your own imperfection, you are free to live with joy, passion, and depth. You no longer see the world through the lens of problems to be solved. You see it through the lens of experience to be lived. This is the final revelation. True freedom is not the absence of knowledge or the escape from the philosopher's curse, but the embrace of it, living fully with the tension of life's contradictions. You don't need to know everything. You don't need to fix yourself or others. All you need to do is let go of the illusion that life should make sense and accept it as it is. With that acceptance comes a quiet, powerful liberation. In this way, the philosopher's curse becomes the philosopher's blessing, not a burden to bear, but a doorway to deeper existence. And so, you stand at the threshold of this truth. The knowledge that has weighed so heavily on you has transformed from a prison into a portal. You are no longer the prisoner of your intellect. You are the master of it. And in that mastery, you find freedom. Now, the question is, will you choose to live with this truth, to carry the paradoxes of existence with grace? Will you step fully into the world, knowing that it is imperfect, chaotic, and mysterious, and yet that is what makes it so profoundly alive? The choice is yours.